Good morning. It's me, Robert Phoenix, with another edition of the Astro Weather, and I'm joined by guess who? Miss Peaches. Yes, Miss Peaches has been warming me up and giving me some astro inspiration. There she is. She's becoming more of a fixture on the show. Have you been taking Jasper? Has been showing you the ropes? Huh? You're a little more needy than Jasper is. Jasper can just kind of come here and do his thing. You demand attention. Yes, you do. Okay, I'm going to do the show now. I have to stop petting you. How is everybody today or tonight, wherever you are? Before I start, I just want to, uh, give some thanks and gratitude to everyone who's left really kind messages and wished me and my small little family well. And by the way, my mother absolutely loved and adored Joan. So when I say family, it's not just me and my kid, who are the last remaining biological descendants of our family. But also Joan played a huge role in uh, just being around my mother, and she had the patience of a saint with her in many regards. So I want to thank everybody for just lending their support. And the first couple days were been pretty difficult, and now I had an interesting conversation with the pastor of her church in California yesterday, and the idea that she's in a better place is starting to hit home a little bit. And so I'm gonna just have a sip of coffee to that. And we're about a couple weeks away from doing her chart as the star of the day, and that'll be my astrological tribute to her. So everybody out there who has parents or children, and I know sometimes it can be really difficult with the people that we live with, um, but we all have a limited shelf life, and I would say do your best to get through the difficult parts and love them as best as you can. And I know that sometimes it can be very challenging. All right. Why don't we get to the weather? We have a very interesting day, astro weather wise. Oh, before I start, please hit the like. It's important. Subscribe. That's important. Hit the bell. That's important. Those are all important because it helps with the algorithm and for you to get notified as to when we will do an Astro Weather or a Friday forecast or a Sunday night Astro Life, or if you're into it, serious sports, which we're going to rev up again on Monday night. We have a lot to talk about with serious sports, and looking forward to getting back in the octagon with my buddy Al Dog. And yeah, so just do all those things, and you can stay apprised and updated for all the things we do over here on the 11th house. Okay, well, why don't we get into the astro weather? Very interesting day. Super interesting. Here we go. We have what's called a chasmi, or a stellium of planets in the sign of Pisces, with predominantly the Sun, Mercury, Saturn all lined up here. And they're all at the same degree. Look at that. They're just sitting right on top of each other, right? And this is a very interesting effect. And I would call it a harmonic effect. Um, when I see this, right? When I see this, especially with Saturn kind of out front, it's interesting because today, by the way, the link for 15 minutes is in the show notes. So if Tom or one of the mods to put that link inside the chat. You guys can follow the conversation after this over on Boxcast. And the Pope is on his way to the hospital, or is in the hospital. The old Popey isn't doing so well. And we have things that come in threes, don't we? Henry Kissinger, Evelyn de Rothschild, and blank, 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 blank. We got three candidates. We got Soros, King Charles, and we have El Popey. And I'm putting my money on El Popey because I actually made a prediction that he would leave the planet this year. This is all kind of in this Casme, Pisces. Pisces rules. Pisces and Gemini. I'm sorry, Pisces and Sagittarius rule religion, right? And Saturn would be the Pope. Saturn would definitely be the Pope. Now, keep your eyes on the moon here, because the moon will move into Sagittarius by the weekend, and the Pope is a Sagittarius. So we would have a moon in Sagittarius squaring Saturn. And eventually that moon is going to come in and square Neptune as well. So that's your Pope watch this weekend. We're on notice here. I feel like America we're in a weird place, because on the one hand, there's this kind of rampant virus that's cutting through our society, where there's this strange juxtaposition of limits and no limits. So one group is accorded a series of so-called rights or privileges that extend into areas without limits, meaning that there are no repercussions for the things that they do. And then on the other hand, we have a group where if you decide to do things like take the law into your own hands, because the people who are supposed to do that have abdicated their posts and responsibilities, there's still enough police and judicial power to make sure that you are punished. There's a punitive aspect to this. So we're in this weird place. But and we're seeing this, right? We're seeing this on so many levels. It's not just that, we're seeing just layers of arrested development and people that are deeply confused about what their gender is and who they are, right? So we're seeing a lot of this confusion, right? Like what was that Genesis song, Land of Confusion, where they had the puppets playing the band? But at the same time now, I'm also witnessing people, kind of, getting sober and waking up, and this is happening, right? I've been watching for the last couple of years, sort of this return to a more organized faith and religion. I'm not saying that you have to do it, but I've been watching it happen. For young men, I don't know if you guys know who Jay, what's his name is, the guy who does all the film stuff, but he was really into kind of the Greek Orthodox school of religion. And so a lot of young men have migrated into Greek Orthodox, so that because it's given him some moral context and moral foundation. And this is kind of what this Casme feels like. It's like people, in a society, in a world where you're kind of rudderless in a lot of ways. People are really looking to ground their faith, and of course we've had also kind of this rise in stoicism. To me, Saturn is very stoic. It is the planet of stoicism. So this is a very interesting energy. And as it comes in and sextiles Jupiter, right, we're also looking for things that ground us. This is not a sexy sextile. Well, it is a sexy sextile. It is not a sexy stellium, but it is a sober stellium. It is a lucid stellium, and it is one that allows us to for a very brief period of time here, and this is a window, right? It allows us to take possession of our senses and our situation in this world. And, Saturn is the lord of limitation, right? But this is, if we embrace the limitation, there is a benefit to the limitation. This is the sextile to Jupiter. So, one of the ideas here would be, and I know for a lot of people, this is just kind of a matter of habit or fact now, looking at your spending patterns, looking at what you're using your money for. If you can cut back on certain things and then reroute that money into areas that can work for you. Yes, and I know that Jamie Dimon and Jeff Bezos and all these other titans of finance are getting out of the stock market. There are still avenues available to you. This is all about hard assets. Taurus is hard assets. So if you are into things like gold and silver, this might be an interesting time for you to reroute some of your resources into that area. And I also feel like it's a very interesting blend between the future, which is Uranian, and Jupiter, which is always about this expansive potential. It's an interesting blend between the future and living within the limitations of the now. This is a day if you have to make difficult choices, you can do it. You can do it without a lot of repercussion. I think this is a good day for being a parent. If you've had to make difficult choices with your children, uh, people in your family, this is not a bad day to do that. Because there's an authority in the air. There's a spiritual authority in the air that backs those kinds of decisions. And I feel like, again, we have this kind of weird interplay between this kind of wild energy with Venus and Mars and the squaring of Jupiter and the squaring of Uranus. And, this is sort of the do as thou will, unhinged, anything goes kind of alliance here. And this is not. It almost feels like this is the separation or the demarcation between two worlds. One is the lesser version of being anarchic, and the other is assembling towards more of an organizing principle on its own, not without any kind of, I mean, who knows? Maybe if you're a church member or something like that, you get it from that part of your life or that part of your world. But it feels like this is self-assembling. That people are kind of coming to these truths. And look at those numbers, right? We're dealing with 999. Like, how profound is that? If you're into angel numbers, there's your angel number for the day, 999. And nine is the end, right? It's the end of something. We come to the end of a cycle with the number nine. So today, this stellium reaches a crescendo. And again, I've been playing with this theme over on 15 minutes that the old world is dying and that we're moving into this new cycle. And so as we do that, we see like the vestiges and people like Evelyn de Rothschild and Henry Kissinger. And now we have the Pope and King Charles and, these very Saturnian figures that have been around seemingly forever. Now they're on their way out. And even in pro football, you had people like Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll who are and Nick Saban who are old coaches for the coaching ranks. Are in their 70s, and Nick Saban retired. Bill Belichick got kind of booted by the New England Patriots, and so did Pete Carroll, who's in his 70s. And these guys are symbolic of kind of this old world, kind of moving aside in a lot of ways. And, this is what all of this kind of reminds me of with this nine energy. And, are they all going to move to 10 at the same time? No, Mercury will move to 10 and the sun will move to 10. Saturn won't move till 9 for maybe maybe by the weekend, 10. But right here, right now, 999, the inverse of 666. Maybe this is the holy water and the antidote for the evil one, the great evil one. But again, for your life, and we're specifically talking about your life, this is one of those days where you actually gain you gain through making choices that tend to be more limited. That there is there's a payoff here, right? There is a payoff. And I think in terms of just interactions with people, without that sextile to Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and the Sun could come off as being really judgmental in Pisces, which is really not a judgmental sign. If you want to be, real about it, Pisces is probably the most unconditional sign. But Saturn puts a limit on it, and Saturn does bring some judgment with it. But here with the sextile to Jupiter, and even to a lesser extent, we'll just talk Jupiter here, 911, interesting numbers. What will we learn about 911 today? Question mark. A travesty, an absolute travesty. Don't get me started. Um, 9/11 was the COVID of its day, wasn't it? COVID was the 9/11 of our time. So if you weren't around for 9/11, it COVID was 9/11 on steroids, worse. Um, I like this day. It's a day of kind of endings in a lot of ways. Um, Endings and limitation, but with the sense that there is something bigger and more expansive as a result of this. It's a very interesting dynamic. So you can hold your ground today, I mean, you can hold the line, as they say, and you can do it with a sense that there's something bigger coming in a good way. Like, not something bigger coming like the next shoe is going to drop. So it's almost like, like how they talk about how at some point this realm kind of splits off into these parallel worlds, right? Like, and we won't even notice the other people that are there. That's one of the great talking points of the ascension crowd, right? Like, we'll just be here, and everybody else who's not supposed to be here will be gone, that sort of thing. And then they'll be in their world, and they'll look around and say, "Where did all those other people go?" And then they'll just start, fucking and fighting each other. Um, but that's kind of what this is like, right? I mean, this is pure anarchy. And again, it's not anarchy in the good sense of anarchy, self-rule, but it's anarchy in the sense that there are events happening and that are uncontrollable. Like, you can see the threads coming apart. And then this is order, right? This is like supreme eternal order. So be at peace. Be at peace. Is that what they say in church? Be at peace. You can, if you want to, get caught up in the melee of the crowd, the madness of crowds. This is kind of what this energy is about, where you can be at peace and this is a really interesting day, and you can try this on as an exercise. Know that everything is perfect and that everything will unfold perfectly in your life and in everybody else's life. Try that today, just as an exercise, right? Just as an exercise. Try not to worry too much about what's happening in the sort of the onslaught of the coming anarchy. Because I do believe we are edging up to very, very chaotic and explosive. We're already there. And then there's this, right? Then there's this. This is everything's perfect. Everything is perfect. My world is perfect. I am at peace. and I'm going to allow the blessings of grace to populate my life. There's your Jupiter right there. So you have a choice. You have two paths here. And this one is a big one, right? Because this is something you can kind of set into motion and start to live with. I think it's quite interesting. Uh, this I wanted to talk about this true node Chiron conjunction in Aries, and I'm pretty perceptive, and I'm usually pretty good at plucking things out of the collective. And I missed this one. And and even if I had spent time with it, I probably would not have come up with it. But that true node Chiron conjunction was the dude that set himself on fire because he was former military, right? So when we get into Aries, we get into military. And Aries is fire and Chiron is vulnerability, right? And so what does he do? He sets himself on fire outside of the embassy, I guess, wasn't it right? Because of what was going on in Israel and Palestine. I mean, that's horrific. We used to see that back in the 60s with these Buddhist monks that would set themselves on fire because of the Vietnam War. That's your symbol right there for the guy that set himself on fire. Just I don't know what that takes. Courage, madness. I do not know what. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen? They're just going to continue to do what they're doing. And he was wasted, horrific. Way to go. I mean, horrible, horrible. But there's your symbol of it right there. Right? The military man on fire. True node, Aries, Chiron. Um, then we do have some sextiles coming in with Venus and Mars. The Venus and Mars dance. Venus is out front, so we get a bit more of the feminine, the masculine trailing here. How would I describe this sextile? Hmm. Well, I would say that, let's say, for instance, if you wanted to explore, if you were a woman and you wanted to explore more of your masculine nature, whatever that is or looks like, this sextile is good for that. It's like kind of lean into it. If you're a man, you want to explore more of your feminine nature, whatever that is, here's the sextile, lean into it. It's okay. Like, I have a son that likes to cook. That's his thing. He's into cooking. And it's like, just lean into it, man. Nobody's gonna, think that you're Julia Child or some shit like that, right? Or if you have a daughter that likes to turn a wrench, give her a toolkit. And so here you go. Here you go. Here's some tools. Have at it. Really? Have at it. So this is kind of what we're talking about here, right? It's the ability to allow other parts of who you are to kind of flex and not be judgmental about it, right? And so this is going to last for, a while. And I don't want to get into that right now. I was going to go off on a different riff and tangent, but well, maybe I will. Maybe I will do that. So Kid Rock was on Joe Rogan recently. And Kid Rock is an obnoxious motherfucker. He's just obnoxious. Like, you either love him or you hate him, right? And he and Dana White have basically wrapped their arms back around Bud Light because Dana White got $100 million from the beverage group that owns Anheuser Busch. Was it Ambev? I think that's their name. Because the boycott against Bud Light was devastating, devastating. So they had to come back around and rebrand Bud Light and have uh, MMA and Dana White's World basically make Bud Light their beer. Dana White um, profited immensely off the boycott of Bud Light. So Dana White should thank each and every person who basically said "F you, Ambev." He should have one night that would just be a free night for MMA, or one night where it's free Bud Light, right? That's what he should do for those people, because without those people, Dana White is not $100 million richer. And so Kid Rock kind of got in on it as well. Right now, he's drinking Bud Light again, and he's hanging out with the CEO of Ambev, and they're going hunting. He's hanging at Kid Rock's club in Nashville, and to me, this is kind of like this sextile too, as well. And it's kind of like, okay, we're gonna make peace. Now, on the one hand, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't drink Bud Light. I think it's terrible. But this is one of the things that I talked about when that was happening, were all the people who were downstream of the boycott, right? You had distributors and drivers, and all their jobs were at risk. And by the way, I'm going to get into some of the places, businesses that are shutting down. You got to pay attention to this, people. Major closures across the country are well underway. If you're not paying attention to it, you're not doing yourself credit here or justice. Anyway, I think in a weird way, this is kind of the reconciliation. When we get into Venus and Mars, and especially in Aquarius, get into that weird Dylan Mulvaney territory. Is he a man? Is he a woman? Right. And all that happened when Pluto first ingressed into Aquarius. And so now we have this resolution where it starts with Dylan Mulvaney and it ends with Kid Rock. We won the culture war. Cheers. Now we can drink Bud Light and not feel like a fruitcake. Um, okay. Here's the moon in Libra, and in the combust degree, and we're getting close to that Pluto square. That's a very interesting square, right? Very, very interesting square. Emotions are intense. People feel really attached to their possessions and their homes. So look at news around foreclosures, people being moved out of their homes. We talked about the whole squatter phenomenon that's coming. And it's interesting too, because, well, it'll probably be kind of outside of the opposition with the moon and Chiron. I'm sorry, True Node and Chiron. So we won't necessarily see people take martial act. Well, they might with that, as the moon moves through that Scorpio phase and it squares off against Mars. I could easily see, all of a sudden now, people are taking matters into their own hands, especially around their homes, around their resource. This is, to me, this moon transit through Scorpio is troubling. It's a troubling transit. And sometimes the moon is no bullshit. Sometimes we get these very intense um, transits that are like reality dumps with the moon. So to me, this feels very much like the intensity of the market, right? That's what it feels like. It's the intensity of the market. It's the housing market. Um, it's not good news coming out of and I think this, as the moon moves into Scorpio, you could look at more sort of panic selling in a lot of ways. I think it's a critical phase here. But remember, right? Here's your choice. Here's your choice. This is the day where you can connect right up to God. Say, okay, here I am. This is my grounding cord. So we can see these things, and then we can test the faith of our reality. Um, what else is the moon doing? That's about it. I do like that Libra moon, though. I'm a fan of the Libra moon. Okay, why don't we get into our star of the day, our True Hemp Science star of the day? And let me get my banner up here. There we go. Right here. Here we go. Our True Hemp Science star of the day, brought to you by True Hemp Science. And True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for all things CBD. All you got to do is spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get a free goodie bag with your order. And the goodie bag are things that you will like. Trust me. And there's a very good chance you'll want more of what's in the goodie bag. If you spend $150 or more, you'll get free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Give our friend Chris well, you can't make a call, but you can make an appointment if you want to find out more about CBD and which product is right for you. Remember, they're all organically sourced, and his method of processing the CBD and what he does to the CBD is unparalleled. He's a wizard. All right, let's get into our star of the day. There she is, the lovely Dorothy Stratten. Wow, what an intense and oddly powerful life Dorothy Stratten. Her real name is Dorothy Hoog Stratten, and she was from Vancouver, British Columbia. And when she was young, she was basically discovered by a hustler. His name was Ron Snyder, Snider. I'll provide you with a visual of the two of them before this is over. And he recognized the fact that she was an absolute beauty. She also was blessed with big boobies. So she was kind of on the Marilyn Monroe um, path, right? She was on the Marilyn Monroe path. The next, looks like she dyed her hair, but the next blonde bombshell. So eventually, her and Ron Snyder moved to Southern California because Snyder had some pictures of her that had sent them to Hugh Hefner, and Hefner thought she was absolutely lovely and invited them to the Playboy Mansion. And Stratton was uh, basically Playmate of the Month. And then she became Playmate of the Year. This is all happening very quickly, all before she's 20. And at the Playboy Mansion, she's discovered by Peter Bogdanovich. And Peter Bogdanovich was a pretty interesting filmmaker. He was very good at period pieces, and he directed one of my favorite movies of all time called The Last Picture Show, and it was in black and white, and it starred Jeff Bridges and Sybil Shepherd and Clu Gulager and Timothy Bottoms and Cloris Leachman. It's Ben Johnson. It's a great movie. I mean, it just really captures the spirit of kind of this, bleak sort of West Texas tumbleweed town that is within hailing distance of the oil rigs, right? And it's all about these very tragic relationships that take place in this small Texas town. And Bogdanovich's style was incredible. And then he went on to do Paper Moon, which was another period piece, but without the black and white stuff. And the guy was on a fucking roll. I mean, he saw himself as kind of the next Orson Welles, but he had a penchant for falling in love with his starlets or women that he would see as starlets. Like he was very, I think, smitten with the archetype. And in fact, when he did the Last Picture Show, he developed a relationship with Sybil Shepherd. He leaves Sybil Shepherd for Dorothy Stratten, and everything in his life becomes Dorothy Stratten. And eventually, he does this comedy that doesn't go so well called Enter Laughing, and he puts her in the movie Enter Laughing. She was also the star of a movie called Galaxina, which was kind of a cheesy sci-fi film, sort of an updated version of Barbarella. But so they wind up becoming like a hot item. And this guy, Ron Snyder, is insanely jealous. And he winds up somehow getting her to come over. They were married. Ron Snyder and Dorothy Stratten had gotten married. So she wanted out, and she brought him $1,000 to get him unplug him from their marriage. And then what he did is he basically tied her up, like bondage style, and then he raped her, right? And then after he raped her, and this is kind of a hard cup of coffee to swallow, he took a shotgun and blew her head off, and then he committed suicide. So Peter Bogdanovich wrote he was, of course, devastated, and he wrote a book about it, and eventually they turned Bogdanovich's book into a movie called Star 80, which was about Dorothy Stratten, and Mariel Hemingway played Dorothy Stratten. That was directed by Bob Fosse. And she's this really tragic figure. And what's really weird, too, is that eventually Peter Bogdanovich would wind up marrying her younger sister. And he gets to know the younger sister when she's 15. But he doesn't marry her until she's no longer a minor. And he'd stayed very close to the Stratton family, her mother and the sister. In fact, they moved in with him for a couple of years. And Bogdanovich had installed a phone in her room, and he was in another room so that she could pick up the phone and call him anytime, right? And it was like they have these phone conversations in the same house. It's a little weird, but all right, let's take a look at her chart. So first of all, the two men in her life that wind up playing tragic these tragic roles in her love triangle are Aries and Leo. So Peter Bogdanovich is a Leo. He's somewhere up here, right? And here's her Uranus, and she really comes onto the scene very quickly. Like Dorothy Stratten starts to take LA by storm. She's the next Jane Mansfield. The next Marilyn Monroe happens very quickly. And Ron Snyder, her paramour husband, is an Aries, right? So I'd have to dig out his chart. But again, if you get the moon in Aries, unless he's way down here at the end of Aries, there's going to be a conjunction here. 8 degrees on one side, 8 degrees on the other, 9 degrees. So it could be 2 Aries, it could be 20 Aries. There's the sun moon conjunction. Same with Bogdanovich, right? Go 9 degrees basically in either direction, 27, 9, right? So Bogdanovich is going to be up here somewhere, and he's going to be kind of responsible for bringing her into the world. Pluto plays a role here as well in this chart. She's got this Pluto-Sun opposition, right? And these Pluto-Sun oppositions are very powerful. And I guess one could make a case in some ways that a Pluto-Sun opposition would be fated. And then down here, we have this Mars in conjunct with Pluto. And of course, Mars represents violence and male energy. And there's this suddenness, right? Everything ends quickly. It ends with a violation and a gunshot. And she does have this Venus-Mars conjunction. But Venus is in front of Mars, so we get more of the feminine than we do the masculine. But, make no mistake about it, Dorothy Stratten was somebody who wanted to escape sort of the doldrums of, whatever neighborhood she lived in Vancouver, right? She wanted out. And that Mars in Aquarius can be quite aggressive. She had terrible boundaries. Terrible boundaries. Look at that Mars Venus square to Neptune. Like she probably jumped in the sack with Peter Bogdanovich before she had finished up with this Ron Snyder guy. And Bogdanovich, had all these connections and power at that time. He was a really, really big Hollywood director. Like he was an A-list director. So he probably thought, well, I can just buy my way out of this or I can protect her or whatever. And that was not the case at all. And with Neptune on her ascendant, again, like her boundaries they're bad. They're really bad boundaries. But her Neptune is also quite alluring because she has this sun in the fifth house. So I just feel like in Pisces, and you got that trine to Neptune, this is just a really archetypal persona, archetypal in the sense that she fits into that Jane Mansfield, Marilyn Monroe, that whole kind of blonde goddess world. And clearly Bogdanovich, who I think was Serbian, was into it, right? He was into Sybil Shepherd before her and her little sister after. And that gets into Dorothy Stratten's third house, which is siblings, right? And it would be her sibling who would be married to Peter Bogdanovich for 10 years. And eventually the mother, who thought that initially he did it out of grief, came around to the fact that he actually fell in love with the sister. It's a weird story, right? Everything about it is just weird. And this is a weird chart. You have Uranus, it's dominated by Uranus and Neptune, like these two outer planets. When you think of the outer planets, think of Olympus, right? And the outer planets are like the gods that just descend, into the realm of the mortals and start moving shit around, right? It's almost like the you don't really have a lot of say with the outer planets. And that's what Dorothy Stratten's life was like. And she was kind of this demigoddess. And Bogdanovich wanted to capture her in all of her glory. Like if he could have, he would have put her in every single fucking film he would have ever made. Trust me on this. And then again, the strange suddenness, right? This opposition with Mars in the midheaven, and particularly Venus in the midheaven, right? And then as a result, Uranus. And then we have some inconjuncts going on here as well. We have a Saturn in conjunct with Uranus. So she wants to break free, but Saturn says, no, you've got bonds and you've got connections and you have contracts. And one of your contracts is with this guy, Ron Snyder. Yeah, it's called a marriage contract. And he was kind of a low life and a pimp. Here, let me show you a picture of what the two of them look like together. I don't often do this, but this is really kind of a testament of the times and how people looked and how the two of them looked together. Let me go back here. So here's kind of a photo montage of here she is with Hugh Hefner, right? Lots of pictures with Hef. And then this is her and Ron Snyder. Like that was her husband. And she's around 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, right? And this guy, look at him, he's a fucking sleazeball. I mean, he just reeks of sleaze, doesn't he? He's an Aries. He just reeks of sleaze. Let me see if we have any other. So this is That's Richard Dawson leaning into Richard, and there's Ron Snyder with the porn stash. So this is the contract that she had. She had the contract with this guy. Here she is with James Caan. And then here's Bogdanovich with her sister. And they got married, right? Um, this whole thing is just so kind of tragic and archetypal, in a 70s kind of way. Right? So she was going to capture the attention of a lot of men. Lots of pictures with her and Hugh Hefner. Now, I have heard that Hugh Hefner supposedly had sex with every centerfold. But then again, I've heard that Hugh Hefner's taste was not that evolved. There she is again with Ron Snyder. So if you want to find out more about Dorothy Stratten, there they are. He just looks like a fucking sleazeball, doesn't he? Talk about archetypal. Oh my God. Anyway, if you want to find out more about Dorothy Stratten, you can do so in the movie Star 80, directed by Bob Fosse, which I think is probably a pretty accurate account of her life and demise. Let me see if I left anything out here. I think Jupiter plays a big role as well. At that final degree of Sagittarius, and just kind of wanting to be free, right? Wanting to be free, and then there's that trine with Pluto and looking for resources. Right? This is all about resources. Had she lived, Dorothy Stratten would have been filthy rich. She would have been filthy rich had she lived. But with Chiron and with the sun opposing Pluto, that was a big if. All right. There you go. Well, thanks for being here and thanks for being part of the show. I wish you all a very pleasant day, evening, wherever you are in the realm. And the link for 15 minutes is hopefully in the chat. It's certainly in the show notes. And come join us over there for a further conversation about what's going on in the world. Until then, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take good care and love to all of you. Bye for now.